Several years ago, I was in Israel and I took a day trip to the Dead Sea. And I was there with my cousin, and we were just sitting there and watching people in the Dead Sea. And if you don't know much about the Dead Sea, what you need to know is it's about 9 times saltier than the ocean. And so due to its high salt content, it's pretty hard for things to live in the Dead Sea. It's pretty natural for things to float in the Dead Sea because that's what dead things do when they spend any amount of time in the Dead Sea. So you can actually look out at people who are alive laying back on the water of the Dead Sea, and they just float because that's what things do. It's like the sea knows if you hang out here long enough, you're going to be dead, so you can go ahead and pretend like what you will be like if you hang out here for too long. And so we were just looking out at people. We were people watching. And they were doing the whole floating thing. But then the second thing that people love to do at the Dead Sea is they love to pick up mud off of the bottom of the Dead Sea floor, and they love to cake their bodies in the mud. And so people will spend time just kind of covering their bodies, and then they will make a short walk up to these freshwater showers and clean off because they think it's therapeutic for the skin. And so my cousin and I, on this particular day, were just looking out at this group of people caking themselves in the mud of the Dead Sea. And man, they were having the time of their lives. They were laughing, they were high-fiving, they were pointing at each other, and it was like a contest of who could be covered more. So they covered every square inch of their arms and their chest and their legs and their neck and their face to where you literally could not see their skin. And so they did this whole mud thing for a little bit, and then they decided, okay, it's time for us to get out and do the thing where we make the short walk to the freshwater showers and pull the shower string and get cleaned off. And so we're just watching. We're watching these people make the short walk up, and man, they are still laughing, high-fiving, having the time of their lives. And that was kind of the climax, and it was all downhill from there because they walk up to the showers and they pull the string and nothing happens. And the only thing that would have made it better for me was a bucket of popcorn because it became extremely entertaining in that moment, because in that moment, excitement turned to panic, and they began to pull the string harder and harder, and in the end, no water came. And so what happened was that which was exciting became uncomfortable. That which was a source of pleasure became a source of displeasure, discontent, and anxiety. And you could just see it in their faces. All they wanted in that moment was to get clean. And the reason I tell you that is because when I think about that story, part of me just wonders, is that story at certain times how our stories feel? Like, do we ever feel like that? In our society, when we use the phrase getting clean, we're actually talking about leaving something behind or getting rid of something in our lives that is no longer giving us life but stealing life from us. That's why, you know what, if someone has an addiction and they go to rehab, they might get out and say, you know what, I've gotten clean. So when we use that phrase, getting clean, we're talking about getting rid of something that's no longer giving life, but stealing life. And I just wonder if there's anyone here tonight that can kind of resonate with that and just say, yeah, there's some stuff in my life that I'd like to get rid of. There's some stuff in my life that I'd like to break free from. Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting clean in my own life, because here's the way things can go. We can kind of cake ourselves with the mud of lust, or porn, or hooking up with random people, or getting wasted or high on the weekends, or we can cake our lives in lying or cheating or being flirtatious and leading people on, or gossiping or having outbursts of anger. And for periods of time, it might be fun, it might be satisfying, it might be numbing, it might be normal, but eventually a time is going to come when that which is enjoyable actually becomes uncomfortable. That which was a source of pleasure becomes a source of displeasure and discontent and anxiety. And in that time, all you're going to want to do is get clean. All you're going to want to do is break free, and what you're really going to need is someone to help you figure out how the shower works. Maybe there's something else at play in your life. Maybe it's a certain insecurity. Maybe it's never feeling like you're enough for people in this world. Maybe it's always looking around and comparing yourself to others, and it just exhausts you. And something in you wants to get clean. You want to break free from that, but what you need is for someone to help you know how the shower works. Tonight, what I want to do is I want to give you what I believe are the 3 ingredients that must be at play in your life if you want to get clean. If you want to break free from something, if you want to experience wholeness in your life, if you want to figure out how the shower works, then I promise you these 3 ingredients must be active in your life. And if these 3 things are active in your life, I promise you that change is possible. Some of you are sitting here saying, there's something in my life that is unchangeable. There is something in my life that is impossible. I promise you with these 3 things, that which is unchangeable is changeable. That which seems impossible is possible. And we're going to find these 3 key ingredients in a story in the scriptures, which is all about getting clean. And it's found in Mark chapter 1. So if you have a copy of the scriptures, please join me there tonight. Mark chapter 1. And if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus Christ, what I'm really getting at here is I'm trying to move us to a place where that which is true about us positionally before God becomes true about us practically before God. What I'm encouraging us to do is to put our position into practice, because positionally, if you know Jesus Christ, you are forever clean before Jesus Christ, because when you expressed faith in Jesus Christ, God opened up the shower of His grace, and He has lavished you with His love, acceptance, and approval and favor, and you are forever clean positionally before Jesus Christ. But practically speaking, we can go through life and it can feel a little bit like being caked with mud, and something in us find ourselves in places where that which is enjoyable becomes uncomfortable, and we're ready for a change. We're ready to break free. We are ready to get clean. So we're looking at a story tonight which is all about getting clean. Let me just read you Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 45. It says this: a man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you're willing, you can make me clean." Filled with compassion, Jesus reached out His hand and touched the man. "I am willing," He said, "be clean." Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cured. Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning: "See that you don't tell this to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them." Instead, he went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places. Yet the people still came to him from everywhere. So this is a story specifically about a leper. And the thing that is paramount in this leper's life is getting clean. And what you need to know is leprosy in the Bible is really a symbol for sin. It's a symbol for the mud in our lives. This story exists in the scriptures because Jesus Christ wants us to become well acquainted with Him as healer and cleanser. And so tonight what I want to do is I want to give you the 3 ingredients that must be active in your life in order for you to get clean. The first ingredient that must be active is desperation. Desperation. When I talk about desperation, I'm talking about you coming to a place in your life where you are desperate for Jesus Christ to step in and make a change. And we see desperation at play in the life of this leper. Let me just take a moment and fill you in on leprosy in case you're not kind of up to date. So leprosy in the Bible was kind of a general term that could refer to a variety of different skin diseases. But to have leprosy was considered one of the greatest evils that you could be afflicted with. And so in hot temperatures, these various skin diseases could be vicious. And so it might manifest itself in boils on your skin. Your skin could be covered in scabs. And a lot of times with leprosy could come a numbing sensation where you couldn't feel what's going on your skin. And so you would sit there and you would itch your skin and you wouldn't know it, but your skin would actually be deteriorating and rotting. Leprosy had that type of effect upon people where their skin became scaly, and in the end your skin would rot and you would become deformed as a person. People viewed leprosy as a living death. Like rabbis viewed you as the real Walking Dead. Okay, before there was The Walking Dead, there was biblical leprosy, all right? That TV series wasn't an original idea. They just read Mark chapter 1. They're like, that'll make a great show. That's what's happening here. They're the real Walking Dead. And so leprosy would ravage your body physically, but it wasn't just a physical thing. Leprosy would devastate your life religiously and socially. Let me read you something from Leviticus. This might be the first time I've ever quoted Leviticus from the stage, so this is a big night for me, people. But Leviticus 13, verses 45 through 46 tell us kind of the consequences of having leprosy. It says this: anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, unclean, unclean. As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. This had drastic effects upon them religiously and socially. They had to live separate from the rest of the world. They had to live separately and worship separately. It would be like coming to Breakaway, and when you walk in, your clothes need to be torn. For some of you, that's already a true statement, but your clothes would need to be torn. Your hair would need to look like you haven't showered. Again, true statement for some people. It's time to stop using Axe body spray. That's not a shower replacement, people. It's a shower enhancement. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. I'm just trying to love you well. But it would be like you walking in here, torn clothes, messed up hair, and you're covering the lower half of your face, calling out, unclean, unclean. And then we would put you in our leprosy section, and we would have a divider just so that there was no contamination. See, people with leprosy were not able to get close to anyone else. They weren't able to experience the joy of physical touch. There was no side hugs or kind of fist bump that turned into a man hug type thing. There was no physical touch. And so anyone who got close to you or within enough proximity to breathe your same air was in danger of being classified as unclean themselves. So this had massive impact on this man. I just want to make sure that you have a picture of what's going on. This man's life is being robbed by leprosy. Leprosy is robbing this man of his health, his reputation, his occupation, his family, his friends, and his ability to worship freely. Probably the hardest part of leprosy is that it was uncontrollable and there was no known cure. And so with all of this in mind, what do we see the man do? Well, we see the man come to Jesus, which we just need to be clear. When he comes to Jesus, he's breaking the law. This man is breaking the law because he feels desperation. He comes to Jesus, he approaches Jesus, and by approaching Jesus, he's not just breaking the law, he's actually putting Jesus in jeopardy of becoming unclean. So people might say that he's being inconsiderate and selfish, but he comes anyway. He comes to Jesus, and he approaches Jesus how? Begging on his knees. Do you see it? This man is desperate for Jesus to do something for him. There's nothing that he wants more in his life than to get clean. Desperation is the first ingredient that must be active in your life. As I was preparing for this talk over the last week, I just found myself asking this question. And I want all eyes on me right now because this is a question you need to ask yourself. The question I found myself asking is, am I really desperate? Like, am I really desperate for Jesus to do something about the mud that still exists in my life? Like, am I really desperate for Jesus to step in and make a change? What about you? Like, are you truly desperate for Jesus to do something? Yeah, I think we could all say, yeah, there's some things in my life I don't like. It would be nice if a change could take place, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking if change sounds nice. I'm asking, are you desperate for Jesus to step into your life and actually do something? See, you will know if you're desperate for Jesus to step in and do something about your porn addiction or the hooking up or the lying or the cheating. You'll know if you're desperate for Jesus to show up and do something if you've found yourself on your knees begging him. So here's a good question to ask. When was the last time you found yourself on your knees begging Jesus to make you clean? How many days, how many weeks, how many months has it been since you hit your knees and begged him? How do we get to a point of desperation? Like, how do we get there? Desperation comes when you reach a point where you've had enough with being robbed. Like, you reach a point where you're like, enough! Enough with the drama, enough with the shame, enough with the guilt. You reach your boiling point where you're like, I am so sick of being robbed. I've talked a lot about the addiction to pornography that I dealt with when I was here during my time at A&M. And I just remember finally reaching to a point where I started looking at the backside of my sin, and I got so sick of it. I was like, I'm so sick of feeling like a spiritual loser. I'm so sick of the guilt. I'm so sick of the shame. I'm so sick of this vicious cycle. Desperation happens when you get fed up with being robbed, but it also happens when you reach a point where you realize that Jesus Christ is your best chance for change. Like, you get past the point where you think that you can do something. You get past the point of just telling yourself, I'm just going to try harder. You get past the point of just trying to discipline yourself to do better. You get honest with yourself and you say, I am weak. I'm hopeless without you, Jesus, showing up and doing something. My hope for some of us this week is that we might connect our needs to our need. That there might be a change in our lives. There might be a movement toward desperation. And that a few of us this week might find ourselves daily on our knees begging Jesus to make us clean. The first ingredient that should be active in your life, if you really want to get clean, is desperation. The second ingredient you will need for getting clean is confidence. Confidence. Confidence is needed if you want to get the shower working in your life. See, when I say confidence, I want to make sure you know what I'm talking about. So all eyes on me, don't miss this. When I talk about confidence, I'm talking about confidence in two things. Number one, confidence in Jesus' ability to do something, but not just confidence in his ability to do something, confidence in his willingness to do something. That's the type of confidence I'm talking about, a confidence in his ability and willingness to do something. I want you to think about the leper. I already told you that leprosy was a living death. Rabbis affirmed, here's what they affirmed. They affirmed that healing leprosy was as difficult as raising the dead. That's how difficult it was to heal leprosy, because there was no known cure. To heal leprosy was as difficult as raising the dead. basically saying it's impossible. But what do we see this leper coming to Jesus in saying? What does he say? He says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Do you see that? He says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. What this means is that this guy believed that with Jesus, the unchangeable was changeable. The impossible was actually possible. He believed that Jesus could be a change agent in his life. But what does he say? He says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. That means he has confidence in his ability, but a question about his willingness. For this guy, it wasn't a question of could Jesus clean him. It was a question of would Jesus cleanse him. That was the question for this guy. And I think it's good for you to just evaluate in your own life. Do you have a question about one of those things when it comes to Jesus? Like, how is your confidence tank in Jesus' ability or willingness to show up and make you clean? I'll just share some of my own story, and I've shared a lot here at Breakaway about my struggle with pornography when I was at A&M. It was a 7-year struggle. If you haven't heard my story, it started the summer before my freshman year in high school, and it didn't end until the summer before my senior year here at A&M. So it was a 7-year struggle for me. And here's the deal. Like, when you struggle with something for 7 years, kind of my experience with pornography is it was just this vicious cycle where I would make this commitment that I was done, and then I would look at it, and then I would feel guilty, and then I would tell God that I was done with it. And so after 7 years of that vicious cycle, I lost any confidence in my ability to clean myself off. But I don't think during that 7 years I ever lost confidence in God's ability to make me clean. I think my confidence in God's ability was always strong because he had the resume to back it up. Like, all I had to do was look at the scriptures, and he had this long resume of beautiful displays of his power. So I think that if he could, speak the heavens into existence, then surely he could make me clean. I never questioned his ability, but I do think that during that 7 years, I did begin to lack confidence in his willingness to make me clean. Because I think I got to the point where I believed that Jesus looked at me and my struggle and just got to a point where he was over it. Where it's just like, man, this thing, you have made the same promise to me over and over, like I'm just over it, is kind of the mentality that I took. And it was like Jesus, I had talked to him about my struggle before and nothing had changed. And so there was that. It was like I had talked to Jesus about getting clean and nothing had changed. And then I was trying some stuff and nothing was changing. And so I think I got to a point where I was like, I don't know that I can see a point where I can ever break free from this thing. And so I don't think I lacked confidence in his ability. I do think I lacked confidence in his willingness. And I wonder where you are at with that. You need to evaluate. Do you have a question about God's ability to make you clean? I think for the majority of us, it's not a lack of confidence in his ability, it's a lack of confidence in his willingness. That's why this passage exists. That's why this story has been written into the scriptures, because Jesus Christ wants us to know that not only is he able, but he is absolutely willing. That's the point of this story, to bolster your confidence in his ability and his willingness. You just look at what happens in the story. Rather than turning from the leper, he turned toward the leper. Everyone else who saw the leper turned and went the other way. Jesus turned toward him. And he made a move to clean him. See, to turn toward him, that was a sign of his willingness. And my hope is that for some of you tonight, you would just sense that God isn't turning away from you. He's actually leaning into you. He's turning toward you because he cares. It's amazing that he touched the man. Jesus didn't have to touch the man. Jesus was putting himself in jeopardy of becoming unclean himself. But just think, this guy hasn't experienced physical touch in I don't know how long. So what a beautiful display of Jesus saying, you want to know how willing I am to do something about this? I'm going to touch you like no one else will. I will put my hand on you when no one else in this society will. And then if you still question if he's willing, Jesus just spells it out. We're in a series called #college. And each week we're looking at 3 words from Jesus that can take your college experience from stereotypical to supernatural. And Jesus spells it out. If you want to know if Jesus is willing to do something, here's his words to you. I am willing. Not only is he willing, but he's able. When he touched the man, instead of the leprosy making Jesus unclean, Jesus' holiness made the leper clean. That shows his power. And all he had to do was say the word. One word that we've translated into 2 words, be clean. And immediately the impossible becomes possible. Jesus wants to use this passage in our lives to bolster our confidence in his ability and his willingness. But if you still question if Jesus is able or willing to do something about the mud in your life, all you have to do is look at the cross of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus' ability and his willingness culminate at the cross. See, Jesus Christ left heaven and came to earth for you and for me. That's being willing. Jesus Christ deserved to be worshiped as a king. Instead, he was voluntarily crucified on a cross for you and for me. That's being willing. On the cross, he endured the wrath of God so that we wouldn't have to. He was punished in our place. He was put in a tomb, and on the 3rd day, he busted out of it victoriously as a display that he had conquered sin and death for us. That's his ability. All you have to do is look at the cross. See, if you want to get clean, if you want to break free, if you want the shower to kind of turn on, then you can't just have desperation. You need to have confidence that God isn't against you. He's for you. He sees you. He longs for you to move towards wholeness. That's what he longs for and wants for your life. So just imagine what can happen when desperation and confidence collide. I just remember when I was stepping out of porn in my life, God began to work in me, and these 2 ingredients began to go to work. There was desperation and there was confidence. I began to wake up every morning praying. Like before my eyes even opened, it's like I just began talking to Jesus. And I talked out of desperation, just saying, Jesus, would you please give me the strength that I need today to be pure? And I began to express my confidence in Jesus because I began to ask him for some things. I began to say, God, let your standard of purity become my standard of purity, because I believe that he would be willing to do that. And I said, God, would you fill me with your spirit today that I might bear the fruit of self-control, because I believed that he would be willing to do that. And then I said, God, in the times when I'm tempted today, help me to see the way of escape that you will provide, and help me to take it, because 1 Corinthians 13 promises that God will always give us a way of escape. And I began to pray that every single day of my life. And slowly but surely, God began to lead me towards victory and cleansing. But you need to know it wasn't just those 2 ingredients that were active in my life. See, desperation and confidence had to be combined with one other ingredient. It was the ingredient of willingness. Willingness. And I just need to be clear, when I say willingness, I'm talking specifically about your willingness, not God's. Do you understand that? When I'm talking about willingness, I'm not talking about God's willingness, because the Word of God and the cross of Jesus Christ have already made it clear that Jesus Christ isn't just able to do something in our lives, he is willing to do something in our lives. He's been very clear in 3 concise words: I am willing. So we know that Jesus is willing. The question is, are we willing? Jesus is willing to make us clean. Are we willing for Jesus to make us clean? Have you ever thought about the fact that if you want to experience cleansing or healing in your life, what if the thing that is hindering you from cleansing or healing is not God's willingness, it's yours? I really need you to follow me on this, because this is so important. I think one of the most important things we can realize is that this story is more about the who than the how. This story is more about who can make you clean. It's less about how he will make you clean. Do you understand that? And that's something that we all have to grasp, because there's times where God will step in and make us clean, just as he made this leper clean. That happens occasionally. That happens from time to time. People have these very drastic testimonies where Jesus shows up and they look one way one day, and then Jesus practically changes them overnight, and they have this radical transformation in their lives, and he heals and cleanses like he did with this leper. That happens sometimes. But more often than not, in my personal experience, cleansing, healing is often a process over time. And it's a process where desperation, confidence, and willingness are used by God to take you towards wholeness. So the question that you need to answer is, are you willing? Like, are you willing? Are you willing to make it a priority every single day to hit your knees in desperation and beg God to make you clean? Like, every single day. This isn't a one-time thing. This isn't you go to a conference or you go to a camp and you feel all spiritual and all convicted, and so you hit your knees and you pray one prayer and you're like, I prayed it at camp, it didn't happen. I don't know what happened to God. He didn't show up. He didn't do his part. No, are you willing to wake up every day and hit your knees in desperation, begging God for change? Are you willing to be fully known? Meaning, are you willing to invite other people into what is going on, and you're willing to expose your sin, expose what's going on in your life, and ask for help? Are you willing to take the time to read the scriptures and to meditate on them every day and to memorize them so that your mind is filled with more truth than lies? Do you know how Jesus combated temptation when he was in the desert for 40 days? He combated the evil one by quoting scripture. Are you willing to get extreme with your sin, even if it means getting uncomfortable or inconvenienced? Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to trade your smartphone in for a flip phone just so that you don't have the temptation? Are you and your girlfriend willing to live your relationship solely in public so that you can be pure? When my wife Catherine and I were dating, we reached a point where we just couldn't trust ourselves to be alone. So we got married, and we didn't even know what it felt like to sit and watch a movie with each other, because it had been so long since we had sat on a couch next to each other and watched a movie. And so there were times, if we wanted to watch a show, we would go sit at Barnes & Noble with a headphone splitter, and we would each just put in our earbuds, and we would watch the show and be like, good, you like it? We're in public, this is weird, great. And it was so inconvenient, and I'm so thankful we did it. Are you willing to change your playmates and playgrounds if you're playing with the wrong people in the wrong places? I remember one of my friends looked at his best friend when he was in college. And here's what he said to him just in a moment. He looked at his best friend and said, if you want to get wasted or get high, don't call me. Don't call me. And the relationship has never been the same since then. And he's been sober now for over 20 years. Are you willing to go to Celebrate Recovery, which is a recovery ministry here in town for anyone dealing with any hurt, any habit, or any hang-up? What about counseling? Are you willing to go to counseling? I'll tell you this, I've worked all the steps at Celebrate Recovery, and I've gone to professional counseling, and I will happily tell you that. Are you willing? This really isn't a talk about pornography. This is just this has been my journey in my own life. But I've told you guys this before. I will meet with guys in particular who want to break free from pornography, and we'll sit down in my office or at coffee, and I'll begin to tell them what it's going to take for them to break free. And it really becomes a conversation about whether they're willing or not. And I begin to talk about what they're going to need to do and how they're going to be inconvenienced and how some things are going to need to get extreme in their lives. And what they do is they lose eye contact with me, and they begin to stop paying attention. I can just see that I've lost their focus. Why? Because they wanted a quick fix and an easy answer. And so I'm looking at them saying, you're not willing. You're not willing yet. I had a friend who saw my struggle with pornography up close, and he saw the path that I was taking to break free. And he decided to just keep trying to baby step his way out of pornography. And so he struggled with pornography for 10 more years. After I did. He didn't break free from it until his 30s. Why? Because it was a question of willingness. Are you willing? Desperation, confidence, willingness. How did things play out for the leper? Well, it's interesting because Jesus tells the guy, tell no one. And what does he do? The exact opposite. It's kind of hard to tell the end of the story because technically he disobeys Jesus, and I'm not supposed to teach you to do that. And so I don't feel good about giving this guy a fist bump or anything like that, but I will say what I do appreciate is that he just couldn't help but tell people about what Jesus had done in his life. Why? Because Jesus had given him a story to tell. And there's been people in my life who have asked me, why do you tell people about your porn struggle from the stage? Why do you don't have to talk about that. You choose to tell people that. Why do you tell people that? Well, I tell people, I share it because Jesus Christ has given me a story to tell. He hasn't given me a story to hide. He's given me a story to tell. And so over the years, God has actually used my story to encourage hundreds, if not thousands, of people in their own pursuit of purity from pornography. And God has led me to now be free from internet pornography for over 15 years now. I have a story to tell. And the reason I tell you this is, can you believe that better days are ahead for you? Are you willing to believe that Jesus Christ can give you a story to tell, that he has a better story waiting for you than the one that you are living now caked in the mud of your life? If you want to get the shower to turn on, if you want to break free, if you want to get clean, you know where it's going to start? It's going to start with these 3 ingredients: desperation, confidence, and willingness. Jesus is here with us in the room tonight saying, I am willing. The question that you need to answer tonight is this: are you?